We've already seen input and output field decorators, and those are the most commonly used. But there are several other field decorators that could be helpful. Let's take a look. Here we have a component called position component, and it has a property called hasRedText. We're initializing it to true. How do we add a class to the component based on this property? We can use the @hostBinding field decorator. And let's take a look at this. We call @hostBinding, and we pass it class dot and the name of a CSS class. In this case, the CSS class name is red-text. So now our property hasRedText controls whether or not this class gets bound to the component or not. So by toggling the value from true to false, we can actually remove this class from the component. So this is very valuable in styling. And here in our position component, we have a method called onClick. We want this to fire whenever our component gets clicked. How do we bind a component click to this method? We use @hostListener, which is another field decorator. We can see it here. We use @hostListener, passing it the event name, in this case click, and an array of arguments. We want to pass it the DOM event, so we specify $event. And then in our method onClick, we can access the event as the first argument. So in this way, using hostListener, we can listen to any DOM event on our host component. So here we have an org chart component. First we'll look at its template, which simply has an @position child. And that's the template. But in the class for org chart component, we have this position property, and it's of type position component, but we want this position property to reference @position in the template. Right now it's not hooked up. Position is always going to be undefined. How do we get access to the position component? We use the field decorator @viewChild. And we see that here. We call @viewChild, passing it the type position component. Then we have our position property name of type position component. So what @viewChild does is it looks in the template and finds the first position component. In this case, it'll be this one right here, @position. And it will assign that to the position property. The only problem is that we have to wait for a lifecycle hook to fire before we can get access to position. It's not going to be available in the constructor, and it's not guaranteed to be available in ng-init, but it is guaranteed to be available in ng after view-init. We'll cover lifecycle hooks in the next video, but for now, just know that ng after view-init will automatically fire when the view's ready to be processed, and position will be available to us for processing. Now in this example, we have @position, but we're giving it a template reference variable, #myPosition. How do we select based on a template reference variable? We use the same @viewChild decorator, but we pass it a string. Before we passed it a type, as you can see here. But to access it by template reference variable, we pass it the string of the reference variable, myPosition. And we can see that here. We call @viewChild, passing it the string myPosition, which will reference this item right here. In this example, we have 3 @position elements. And also in our org chart, we want to get access to all 3 of these elements. We want to store them in positions. And of course, this isn't set up yet. How do we select all @position components? We use the field decorator @viewChildren. So that's just the plural form of @viewChild. And we can see that at work right here. We call @viewChildren, passing it the type position component, and this will populate positions with all 3 positions. Now notice that we're not working with arrays here. We're working with a special Angular class called a query list, and it has a generic type. So positions is of type query list of position component. And again, make sure that if you want to access positions, you wait for the lifecycle hook ng after view-init. Here you can see that we're accessing positions, and we're calling for each on it. So this will loop through each one of the positions and log out the title. And for more information on the methods that you can use on a query list, you can consult the Angular documentation. The most common method is for each, because you would usually want to loop through the list. In this example, our org chart component has 3 positions, but it's also possible to pass in more content into the org chart, as we can see with the ng content tag right here. So we've seen the view child and the view children decorators, and we know what those do. What are @content_child and @content_children used for? Querying ng content. So content child and content children will select components within ng content. So there's a very distinct differentiation here. You use view child and view children to access elements outside of the ng content, and to access elements within ng content, you use content child and content children. And the usage and syntax are the same, so I won't go into examples for content child and content children. And that's all we have for field decorators. In the next video, we'll take a look at the lifecycle hooks that we've already talked about.